This is Grafted Together with ACSI Chief Ministry Officer, Jerry Nelson.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to the Grafted Together podcast. I know I've been able to host a couple of these over the past couple of months, but my name is Doug Campbell, and I'm the Ministry Team Coordinator at ACSI. A part of my role is I get to lead our internal staff in spiritual formation, but I also get this really cool opportunity to connect with school leaders through what we call our Spiritual Formation Network. And this is something that we created a couple of years ago to bring leaders together, for them to discuss ideas and to collaborate, to encourage one another, to strengthen one another in the places and the spaces that God has called them. And at the heart of this network, we've been talking through this year, is we really want to come alongside our school leaders to help support them and equip them in creating an intentional plan of spiritual formation within their schools. And we've used a tool called the Spiritual Formation Journey Map to help them do this. And this journey map, as we've talked about before on the podcast, really has 4 key ingredients that we believe are a part of a good, intentional, comprehensive framework for spiritual formation within the school. So throughout this year, in our quarterly meetings, we've been talking through each of these destination markers. We've talked through things like expected student outcomes. We've talked through things like spiritual formation assessment. And we've also spent some time talking about what it looks like to come alongside our staff, our students, and our families to train and support them in their own biblical worldview integration and also in their spiritual formation and discipleship. So as we kind of near the end of this second year of the network, we're going to focus today on that third piece of our spiritual formation journey map, which is roadblocks, talking specifically about care in hardship and looking at what ways do we come alongside our staff and our students and those in our school that we walk with when they experience difficult times and seasons of crisis in their lives. So before we move on and I introduce our speakers for today, I do want to say that our final network meeting for the Spiritual Formation Network is coming up on Tuesday, April 28th. That's going to be 1 to 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And we're actually going to be focusing on this topic. Our speaker for that day is Dr. Milton Gonzalez at Covenant Christian Academy in Texas, and he's going to be leading us in this discussion. And if you have not joined those meetings or if you've not joined the network, I would love to invite you to do so. So you can go to acsi.org/spiritual formation. And when you click on that screen, you'll see on the right side of that screen, there's a button that says join the network. Click join the network. And if you haven't joined the network, you can do that. But then you can also click that button, and right below where it says join the network, there's a space where you can join or you can register for this upcoming meeting. And I will tell you, these meetings have been very beneficial for our school leaders. So please be a part of that. There's a teaching time. There's also a small group discussion time where you get an opportunity to connect with school leaders who are doing the same work you're doing in their schools, and just to share ideas and get encouragement and connect with people has definitely been a huge part of the network. But I want to move on to today. Today we have 2 guests on the podcast who are going to help us in understanding how to best come alongside our students, our staff, and our families in seasons of hardship and times of crisis. And so the overarching questions that we hope to answer today are this: what does it look like for us to create environments of care and support for our staff, our students, and our parents when they experience a hardship or a crisis? And then secondly, how can we build and implement structures within our school that allow our people to experience care and safety and help them to flourish mentally, emotionally, and spiritually when they experience the inevitable difficulties that life bring? Okay, so that's 2 loaded questions, but I think we have 2 very capable leaders here today who are going to help us navigate through what it looks like for us to do this. And so today, without further ado, I want to introduce our 2 speakers. We've got our 2 guests on the podcast today. We've got Courtney Crenshaw and Brayden Brown on the podcast today, both who work in the area of spiritual formation at Liberty Christian School in Argyle, Texas. So Courtney and Brayden, welcome to the Grafted Together podcast.
Thanks for having us. We're excited to be here.
Thanks. Awesome. Well, let's start with some introductions. Just briefly tell us your name, your school, how long you have been in Christian education and a little bit about your role and the responsibilities that you have there. So, Courtney, let's start with you and then we'll move to Brayden.
Yeah, so I have been at Liberty Christian for 8 years now, and I get to serve as the upper school girls minister. And I also get to lead our spiritual life team and be one of the leaders of our student protection program. And so, what that looks like is we do 100 different things in a day, and every day is different, which is really sweet. But we also get to do all of the discipleship opportunities for our school. We get to be over our chapel programming, really just what does spiritual formation look like on campus, anything that it does. I feel like we get to be a part of just crafting what that looks like for our school.
Awesome. Brayden?
Yeah, my name is Brayden Brown. I also work at Liberty Christian School on the spiritual life team. I specifically get to focus in on middle school boys. So I'm the middle school boys minister on our team. And so just like Courtney said, we get to participate in really anything having to do with spiritual formation at our school. So deep discipleship programs, opportunities for spiritual events like retreats and mission trips, but really just getting to be an older brother or sister in the faith for some of our students as they're figuring out what it looks like to walk with Jesus in their years at our school.
That's awesome. Yeah, I just met Brayden for the first time earlier. I've known Courtney for a couple of years, and I even said I told her that if she's invited Brayden to the podcast, he must be sharp, must be capable, is going to really give us a lot of good insight and feedback. And also mentioned too, he said that he works with middle school only, and I'm like, man, that's a spiritual gift in and of itself. I know it's not listed in Scripture, but I think you guys who are listening understand that to be the case.
I love it.
So look, let's talk a little bit about just your personal faith journeys. So it gives us an opportunity to not only really learn about the topic at hand today, but also to hear a little more about you guys and how the Lord has brought you to Liberty Christian, the ways He's been working in your life. So just share a little bit about your faith journey, what brought you to the school, and then how has your journey shaped the way that you view Christian education and spiritual leadership? Brayden, let's start with you.
Yeah. So I grew up in Richardson, Texas, so about 45 minutes away from where our school is. Grew up with a dad who was a pastor at a local church in the area. So grew up with two parents who loved Jesus like crazy and invested deeply in me and my siblings to raise us to be men of character and men who follow Jesus. And so I'm so grateful for the foundation that they laid for me. Spent my whole education years in public school, and I think one of the cool aspects of stepping into this role is getting to see the beauty and privileges of getting to have spiritual mentors and deep discipleship happening in the day-to-day world of our schools is something that I longed for as I was growing up, but had to wait till Wednesday or Sunday for most of the time.
Yeah.
And so getting to step into these spaces has been really sweet. My journey with God has been a slow, gradual process. There wasn't necessarily like a big moment where the light switch turned on and everything changed for me. It's been a gradual falling deeper and deeper in love with Jesus, being more and more captivated by His heart and His mission in the world. And so really in college fell in love with discipleship, fell in love with ministry, and decided I wanted to pursue a grad school program to spend the rest of my life doing that type of work. And while I was there, I was previously connected with Courtney as well as her husband, Luke, and a position opened up at Liberty, and they were like, hey, you should consider applying to this position. We'd love to have you join our team. And was moments away from accepting a different job. And the Lord had other plans, and I've been at Liberty for 5 years since, getting to do work that I believe is so meaningful and purposeful and helping bring the kingdom of heaven here as it is in heaven. So
that's awesome, man. Yeah, those divine intersections that happen. Before we started the podcast, we were having a little bit of a discussion about how Brayden came to be at Liberty, and Courtney pretty much said, well, we we found out he was going to take this other role, but we were like, no, we've got to have him at Liberty. And so we actually had a whole presentation laid out as to why he should accept the job here. And he took it, and the rest is
It
history.
worked.
Like you said, you've been
And
there
we can
5
make a good
years.
presentation.
What's that?
We can make a good presentation.
There you go. There you go. You were very
True.
convincing, obviously. So yeah, Brayden, man, it's really cool to hear your story and hear how the way that you have that foundation of people pouring into you, now you get to do the same thing within the role that God has called you to. So yeah, thanks for sharing. Courtney, what about you?
Yeah, I not only get to be in the education sphere right now, but I was really formed by Christian education. So I started in Christian schools whenever I was in kindergarten, and can just say that so much of my spiritual formation is due to the space that I got to be in for all of my school. And so I think getting to have that strong biblical foundation through my classes and having teachers and mentors and coaches that were really investing in my life, that created discipleship opportunities that allowed me to work out my faith in those spaces, and give me opportunities to even lead and to fail and to grow and to be sharpened. Just really transformed what my relationship with Jesus looks like. And I can't imagine, what it would look like had I not. And because of that, when I thought I was going to go into the corporate world, and in college, God at the end very clearly called me into ministry. And so I was just seeking the Lord of, okay, what does that look like? And really my heart was just, I would love to get back into the school system, because I joke that this is like a playground of opportunity, just the amount of hours that we get to be with our students, the space that we get to be in with them, is just being able to provide some of what I know really was so transformative for me, is such a blessing. And I think when I think about this through the lens of even care, I walked through some really difficult seasons of just processing, like, how do I handle these things? And how do I work through hard relationships, even within my family, and process through these things? That it was so many of the people in my school setting that came alongside me and helped me grow in those spaces. And so I think when I think about what does that look like in the school setting, having the Holy Spirit within us, that's able to show us, we obviously can't. At the beginning of this job, I got asked, how are you going to disciple all of our students? From a staff member was asking me this. I was like, well, I'm not capable of discipling all of our students. But I know, and they were like, how will you know which students are wearing the mask and which students are walking through something hard, and even processing through that, it was like, I am not capable of walking through every moment of the day with them, and knowing, when did that student say something in the hallway that's going to stick with them for years and years and years, and be a lie that is from a wound that was created 30 minutes ago, or when they get celebrated and asked by somebody to homecoming, or they're failing the test that they are trying so hard to get into this college, or whatever those spaces are. I can't walk with every student in our school, but what I do know is that I have a God who is with them through every single one of those moments, and I have the Holy Spirit within me. And when I am leaning into being led by the Lord and seeking the Holy Spirit of, would you reveal to me, even if there's a student that needs to hear their name in the hallway, would you give me the ability to know that? Then I'm able to step into those spaces. And so I think because I felt seen and cared for and loved by the time I graduated high school and got to continue on in that pathway, it has totally transformed the way that I even get to be a part of my job at Liberty and be looking to be someone who sees and knows our students as well.
Yeah, that's a good word. Good word. I love the playground of opportunity. And it is. That's one thing. You guys know this, being in this school space. You have the interaction throughout the day. You've got 180 days a year, you get the face-to-face interaction with students, with staff, and with families. And so it is a great opportunity. And I myself was a product of Christian education as well. So it's really cool to get to work at a Christian school that I went to, but then now get to be a part of ACSI and get to connect with leaders like you guys who are continuing to do it. So it's such a blessing, and it's really cool how the Lord weaves all those things in and out with our story to bring us where he wants us to be. So let's jump into the conversation. I'm really excited about this today. I think, Courtney, you've already alluded to some of the things that we'll step into and talk about. But I'd like to start with just some foundational questions before moving into the specifics around this topic of care and hardship. Courtney, let me start with you. The first question I want to ask is, why is caring for others in hardship such a critical part of spiritual formation, not just a secondary aspect, right? It's not just this thing that's thrown to the side, but it's a major part of what we do as spiritual formation within our schools. And in broad terms, what does this look like within your school at Liberty?
Yeah. I think this question makes me think of the C.S. Lewis quote that says that pain is God's megaphone to rouse a deaf world. And I think,
Mhm. That's good.
we see that so much in the lives of our students, our staff, our families, that when they're going through whatever kind of suffering or hardship or difficulty that they're experiencing, that there is this uh, openness to their hearts, that there is a longing for something that can be an anchor to their souls in that space. And so when you're thinking about the spiritual formation of our students or our staff members or whoever that may be, but primarily if you're thinking through for our students, that it goes beyond so much of, okay, I'm just teaching them knowledge about these things. I'm teaching them that God is a God of comfort, which is true, but it's stepping into that place of how do I model for them even the ministry of presence, of sitting with them and walking with them through these things, to where their faith is going from, okay, I believe this, into, okay, now this is transforming my life and the way that I know that this is what I believe. It's becoming my hope. It's becoming my anchor. And I think we see that even throughout scripture, that in these places of suffering or of hardship, that is where the transformative work of the Holy Spirit is so clear and profound, because we see, okay, I have a need. I have a very clear need in my life right now. And that is clearly for a Savior and for God, and also for others and for my community. And I think why that is so important to be a priority for our school is that these are the things that are going to go with them so far beyond what they're experiencing in that moment. If you are walking through something difficult and your school is rallying around you and coming alongside you through that, when you graduate, you're going to forget a lot of things, but that's going to be, I think when we view it as like, okay, their graduation ceremony is the comma, it's not the exclamation point to their faith journey. And so how can we give them this vision for, hey, here's how you continue to walk with God through all your days? And I think that those are the things that are going to actually really impact the way that they view God, because of how they saw God through the way they were experiencing you within the Holy Spirit. And so I think at Liberty, what I would say that we do, or how we view this broadly, is I think that we're intentional to not let people fall through the cracks. And I think we're intentional to not let them walk through hardship alone, and are looking for opportunities when things like this happen, that we may step in and link arms with and come alongside, and then point them to Jesus, who's the only one that's going to give them any kind of true peace or comfort or healing or hope.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Brayden, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think we'll talk more about this as we continue the conversation, but I think we have a unique opportunity to equip our staff to be empathetic witnesses to the pain that people are carrying. Everyone is carrying present hardship that they're walking through. They're carrying leftover pain from past hardship that
Yeah.
that they haven't sorted through,
Yeah.
and they're anticipating future pain too. And
Yeah.
so, really, what we've seen our students, our staff, our families long for is someone to stand with them, to see them, and to be part of bearing the burdens that they carry. Not necessarily providing found like amazing words or saying the right thing,
Absolutely.
but just a presence that is empathetic and hopeful has made the difference.
That's good. Yeah, we'll definitely talk a little bit about that presence piece, because I think that's really important when it comes to these things. Brayden, we'll stay with you for a second. I want to know, I know this is kind of a loaded question, and trials and crisis kind of come with seasons at times. What I mean is, like, there's going to be various big things that happen, and there's just going to be also just the kind of daily, monthly, typical hardships that students or staff or parents are walking through. But what are some types of hardships that you think are most commonly seen right now among the students and the staff and the parents even that you're working with?
Yeah. Yeah. I think even the way you frame that question is super helpful, because I think our tendency often is to focus primarily on uh, this kind of comparison of the crisis
Yeah,
that are
yeah,
going on and
yeah,
elevating ones that like are in a certain category. And
yeah,
it's easy to show up for those people, but the people who get neglected are the ones who have been minimizing their own pain because they're
yeah,
comparing it to somebody else's. And
yeah,
so I think
yeah.
that's
That's
part
good.
of our role too, is to
That's
go,
good.
hey, we don't want our students, our families, our community to minimize their story, minimize the pain that they're walking through, but we want to meet them with a level of love wherever they're at,
Yeah,
whatever they're walking through. But I think we see familial brokenness, whether it be divorce or estranged relationships with family members, siblings, parents. I think we're seeing a growing lack of purpose in a lot of our students
yeah,
who are just wrestling with what's the point,
hmm,
as they grow in digital distraction, digital addiction.
yeah,
There's just this like low level futility and numbness
yeah,
that's creeping lower and lower and lower from upper school to middle school, even to some of our lower school students who are wrestling with questions of like, why am I here? What do I live
yeah,
for?
yeah,
I think that often leads to hardship and crisis of like self-contempt, just these feelings of um, hatred and criticism towards themselves. Sometimes that can happen in high performance environments, high pressure
yeah,
environments
yeah,
that some of our schools can become for people, especially. And so um, that could escalate to things like suicidal ideation
hmm,
or really heavy mental spaces. And so there's a huge gamut of what our students, what our families are walking through. And the
yeah,
reality is it's really similar to what families in local public schools are walking through because
yeah,
it's what
sure,
humans walk through.
for sure,
So
absolutely. Yeah, man, I think as we talk through a lot of these things, I like the idea that students. I don't mean like, in the sense I like the idea. What you said about how students can kind of minimize their pain or their hurt or their suffering because, well, I haven't lost a loved one, or I haven't lost a friend, or I don't have a parent who's walking through, who was just diagnosed with cancer. And so my thing's not as, but Jesus kind of meets us where we are in all of those things, and he cares about all those things. And I think there's the other side of it too, that you guys are having to navigate. And now I've got young kids, so we're navigating some of this, but this culture that we're living in just continues to get more difficult. And that's not necessarily a need. That doesn't mean we need to go to despair, because we have a Bible that we can always anchor ourselves to. We have a Lord who lived the things that we lived, and he went through the difficulties of life and showed us how to do it perfectly. So we have the ultimate example in front of us in Christ. But it is interesting how the culture can really just infiltrate and impact all those things, and how there's so much now that our students can be involved in. There's so many things that can distract them that it actually can almost dehumanize them, and it causes them to forget that, hey, I'm here because God has created me and he's called me to be a part of this story. So it's almost like there needs to be this recapturing of the story of God and how great that is, and how looking in doesn't really solve the problem, but looking out and looking up is what solves the problem. And that doesn't mean to minimize what people are walking through, but I think there needs to be this recapturing of the story of God and recaptivating our hearts and our minds around who he is, and what he's doing around us. Um, so I like to, before we move into strategy and talking about, practical tips or supports and structures in our school, I would like to kind of come back again to kind of your personal stories and how you guys have walked through seasons of crisis with students or with staff. Um, but I know we can talk all day long on, like I said, the proper structures and the supports. But I think it would be helpful for our leaders to also hear and to know how you guys have personally navigated these situations within your school. So, Brayden, as you kind of think about you and your time at Liberty, and it could have been even before your time at Liberty. Is there a specific situation that you could share where you and your school or in another time of your life walk closely with someone through a crisis? And then what are some things that you learned in that process, and how did you see God work in the middle of that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so many examples that I could run to. This feels like it's a daily, weekly part of what we do here.
Yeah.
For example, a couple years ago, we had a student who was in middle school whose father passed away unexpectedly.
Mm.
And sixth grader was just navigating that world was super overwhelming for him. And I think what we got to do is be a safe place for him to be raw and honest about what he was carrying, what he was walking through. It was a safe place for us to invite him to take that raw honesty to someone who could hold it, which is Jesus. To have him get to take all this and move towards the one that could carry it. And so we just got to walk with him. We didn't try to do too much in the beginning, but just tried to be a steady presence of love for years and still are. And so I think giving him the space to not be okay in a season that's hard and not rushing him towards finishing the grieving process in a certain amount of time or any of that. And then just not putting pressure on ourselves to say the right thing. To do a lot less speaking and a lot more listening.
Good.
I think is the pathway that we've seen bring healing. If we try to move too quickly, it honestly often just leads to more pain and confusion. And so playing the long game of slow present love has been most fruitful for our students and faculty.
The long game of slow present love, man. That's good. That'll preach, man. That'll preach. Hey, Courtney, I'd like to kind of put the same question in front of you. So thinking through times in which you've walked with people through crisis, whether it's at the school. So share a little bit of that, but then also, what made that moment or those moments particularly challenging?
Yeah. I think I would be surprised if someone is in Christian education for any reason other than the opportunity for investing in building relationships with students. And so I would think that anyone thinking through this lens, that you just care so much for our students. The story that this reminds me of was from my first year at Liberty, and was just loving just getting to know all of our students. And there was one student in particular that, in unpacking, just there was a lot of bitterness and anger toward God. And the more that we would talk, I mean, we met all the time. And the more that we would talk, the more that she would slowly reveal. And then it ended up being a situation that had to be even elevated to the place of having CPS get involved. And just it was just a lot. It was very hard to walk alongside and heavy to carry. And I remember one day in particular where she and I were just talking about, like, who is God in the middle of all of this? How is there a good God in this? And I remember driving home and just weeping and me starting to question, like, God, how did you allow this to happen? And God just so lovingly but firmly being like, hey, I love this girl more than you ever could. And I was with her through all of that, and I will continue to be with her through all of that. And you have this portion of getting to be a role of pointing her to me. And I think that was the wake up call for me then, that God I definitely will come back to at different spaces. But I think the tendency that we can sometimes have is wanting to be even like without recognizing it, finding identity and being the person that students go to, or being the person that knows all the things about, or I care the most about this student, or I've showed up for the student the most in this way. And I just was given this picture of, okay, I'm just a piece of this, and I can't bear the weight of all of it. I wasn't made to bear the weight of all of our students' stories. And what I get to do is I get to come alongside and help bear the burden and lift off the weight from her shoulders. But it's not because I'm supposed to carry it. It's because I'm supposed to model for her, what does it look like to take this weight and lay it down at the feet of Jesus. And I think that in particular changed the way that I continue to do ministry from there on out. But I think that there is a learning piece in that of if I feel so, like I'm the only one that cares, then I start to do a disservice for this child that could be getting greater help if I let more people in on what was going on in this situation. Like, what is so hard, I've had to call CPS more times than I would ever want to over the last 8 years for, completely different stories and reasons and whys. And it is never fun. It is never fun. And it often doesn't feel like it is the right thing because we see what happens on the other side of the CPS call. And sometimes it's like, that is not how I would have worked it out or put it out. Yeah. And I think that is one of the heavier pieces of encountering students in crisis. And that's one of the pieces where you also have to say, I am not in control of this story or of this child. And I get to trust in the Lord that he has already gone before all of this child's days and is involved in every detail. And I have to recognize what my role is. And I'm not the one wearing the cape and being the hero of the story. The only hero is Jesus. And so that's just what my mind went to with that question.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you guys being parents as well, you would understand this. It's one of those things that, God has entrusted our kids to us, but, I'm reminding myself all the time with our boys, like, yes, they're our kids, but they're not really our kids. Like they ultimately belong to the Lord. Now he's called us to steward. He's called us to discipline and to raise them in the way that they would hopefully one day turn to him and the Spirit would regenerate their hearts. But ultimately, I have to give up control because like what you're saying, sometimes us wanting to be in control can actually get in the way of what God is wanting to do in someone's life. Even though it seems to be well-intentioned and good and right, there are some of those situations in which we really have to be so Spirit-led and sensitive to him that say, hey, Lord, this is how I would do this, or this is really what I want to do, but I feel there's a check right now within my spirit that I don't need to step into this. Or like you said with CPS, like I wouldn't have made that same decision, but I know in that moment this was the right thing. And at times I kind of have to let go of that control and know that my role, all our roles, like we support what the Lord is seeking to do. Like we come alongside his ultimate work in the lives of the students and the staff that we're getting to work with. I love that. I love that perspective, but it's always hard for us because as humans, we want to grip as hard as we can on these things and hold on and want to be the one that people come to. And we want to be that, it's a great perspective, but ultimately we have to know that they belong to the Lord, and that the Lord is working in their lives, especially in these seasons of difficulty that are really hard to navigate through. So let's move then from story into strategy, because I think, we can talk a long time about the stories, and I think it's key that we do, because I think all of us, and I think our leaders who are listening today need to realize that like none of this is easy. And I'll say this again at some point throughout the podcast, I'm sure, but there's no like cookie cutter approach on here's how to walk with someone in grief and hardship and suffering. Like we know what scripture tells us. We know the principles to follow. We know the verses to follow. We know that there are stages of grief, and we know that at times you need to let someone weep and just be the presence there. And other times that the Lord is calling us to speak truth and to share a word of encouragement to someone. But I think just for everyone who's listening to the call, take a deep breath and know, like what Courtney just mentioned, that you are not the answer to this, that ultimately Jesus is the answer to this, and that these things are messy. Like this is a part of discipleship, and discipleship is messy. It doesn't fall into categories like we think it should. Even when Brayden, you were sharing a little bit about your testimony, it was, kind of said it was like this slow burn of love towards him. Like it didn't just automatically happen and then I'm good. Like we never get to that point of arrival. And so we're constantly learning and growing. And I think we see that a lot when it comes to walking with students and difficulties and hardships. I say all that to say, I don't want us, and I know we're not doing this, but I don't want anyone to think that we're approaching this topic with rose-colored glasses. There's not always going to be the perfect answer or the perfect scenario, or there's not even going to be the best system or program that's going to solve all the problems because we still have to walk with people through difficult situations and things never follow the exact order of how we want to do it. And I think too, and you guys have both kind of mentioned this, that these situations are really one of the most difficult aspects of the role of leadership in Christian education. These things are not easy. And so, but I do think in the same, within the same thought, though, it's one of the most important things that we can do as Christian school leaders is, even though things are difficult, it is good for us to have a plan in place and to think through, hey, when this does happen, who's going to be the first one that reaches out to this student or this family? Who's going to be the point of contact so that we're not allowing people to fall through the cracks or that we're not overbearing people with constant communication and people saying, hey, I heard this is going on. I heard this is going on. It's good sometimes to have a plan in place. And so let's talk a little bit about that because ultimately we want people to be loved. We want them to feel cared for. We want them to be supported in times of crisis. So, Courtney, when you think about Liberty and the years that you've been there, and I know these things have probably changed over time. And at the beginning, maybe you didn't feel like you had a ton of things in place, but as you went through some of that trial and error, you realized, hey, I could have done this better here. So next time this happens, and that's what really the Lord uses those things to help us kind of create some of these systems of supports within our school. So, what systems and structures have you and your team put in place at Liberty Christian so that people don't fall through the cracks in times of crisis, so they don't feel unsupported when they encounter whether it's physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual hardships? What are some of those systems and structures you guys have in place at Liberty?
Yeah, that's really good. We definitely have lived through a lot of does this work? Does this work? And I think that there are three different things in particular that have been really fruitful in our ability to see our students and make sure that they're not falling through the cracks. So one of those things is something that we called student ministry teams. So we call them SMTs. Everybody loves, a good
little acronyms.
Yeah.
I'm in the ACSI world. I'm still learning it. I'm 2 years in.
Yeah. I'm not done. I have like 3 more to tell you guys. So just get ready.
Awesome. Get your pens out. Take some notes.
Yeah. SMTs, student ministry teams. So those are our grade level teams will get together, and it's usually about every 2 months, I would say. It's part of our rotation of our faculty meetings. And it's in that rotation that they meet in their SMT groups. And so it's every 1 to 2 months, and a grade level will get together, and it is led by the spiritual life team. Is one of the spiritual life team members is in each of the meetings. And then also our counselor for the prospective area is in those meetings and gets to help run them alongside our vice principals are the ones that help guide us in that. So what we do is we basically sit down and we just create space of, hey, we want to be able to talk about our students. If we're sitting down with all of our 7th grade teachers, hey, are there any 7th grade students that have been standing out to you guys that it seems like something's going on? Is there ways that we can partner and come alongside? Are there even behaviors that you have been seeing that we can create a strategy for how to best help this student? So what that will look like is it could look like I've got a junior in high school who has always cared about their grades, has always been making really great grades, but all of a sudden they are not turning in any homework for me, and it seems kind of out of character. So I throw that out to the group. Have y'all noticed that something is going on with Jill? I don't know how many Jills are with Jill. And someone's like, actually, like they haven't really been passing my tests, and they usually pass my tests. And then a conversation happens, and typically there's someone that has some piece of information. And even if there isn't, it's, hey, it seems like something is really going on with Jill. Who is Jill's mentor? Because we have in our school, we have mentor groups. And so it might be like, hey, who's her mentor? Let's see if that's even an avenue. Or a lot of times, if they're involved in athletics or fine arts, the conversation turns to like, what is it that drives Jill? Like, what are the things, who is it that has connected with Jill? And let's follow up with them and have them touch base and see, is there something going on in her life? Because odds are, if all of a sudden we have just a strict behavior change, that something is going on in her world, and she's looking like someone needs to step into that and just explore. And then sometimes it could be a piece of information of like, hey, this isn't for the world to know about. I think that's really, we do a lot of work in the front end of the purpose of these meetings, the heart behind them, that they are not just to create a room of, complaining about students or anything like that. These should be encouraging conversations that give us the ability to say, how can we come alongside a student? How can we rally alongside them, that they have all of the support that they need? And a lot of times it looks like, hey, we've got to give this child some grace when it comes to academics, or we need to be seeing them through this lens. And so that's the conversations really center around what are we seeing in our students. And so it could be like, hey, we found out that this person's parents are going through a divorce. We haven't seen anything in them yet. We might not see any behavioral changes, but if y'all could just be aware that they're walking through some things. And if the door is open, maybe just step in and be like, hey, what's going on? And so I think that has really not only given the ability to know information that is already known on campus in little pockets, but it also has turned our teaching teams into these student ministry teams, like to start viewing one another as we're partnering with one another in the way that we can reach our students. And we're even being examples for one another in discipleship. Early on, even there were conversations of like, wow, I can't believe how well this teacher knows her students. I want to know the students better the way that they do. So student ministry teams is one of the really beautiful things that we've done. And the second meeting that comes off of that is called Eyes on You. We don't really call it EOY, but on our meeting, sometimes it is EOY. So Eyes on You is then from all the information that was just gathered. It's okay for high school, for example. That's when we pull together all of our academic advisors. We bring in the athletic director and the fine arts director. And then we have the spiritual life team and our principal team and our counselor. And it's all of us at the table together. And we just kind of go through the summary of 9th through 12th grade. What are some of the things that we heard? So we make sure, I think a lot of times something can get caught in a school in one area. Like it can get caught, only academic team knows this, only the coach knows this, only the fine arts director knows this. And so it's also even modeling, how are we partnering together to make sure that we are caring for our students. And part of our mission involves that we're creating a holistic approach in the way that we are taking care of our students. And so how are we viewing our students in a holistic light, that we're taking care of them from every angle? So I think that is the two of the main things. The last thing, I know I've been going on.
No, you're good. You're good. Continue. Yeah. I'm going to have some follow-up questions anyways, and then we're going to pass it to Brayden, and he's going to share too. So you're good. This is the meat of
right. Yeah.
So you're good. You continue.
Yeah. The other thing that I think that is really beautiful that we've created is we have a large spanning student protection program that looks at has created a lot of different protection elements and has turned very cultural in the way that we view and approach ministry with students. So we've got boundaries on the way that you can communicate with students in an appropriate way, that you can feel safety in the way that you're engaging in conversations, and can even more so step into ministry opportunities because you know that you have the safety of the school and the boundaries that have been set. So we have a whole student protection program, but a part of that is that we have an internal report that our faculty have access to. and it's a student concern report essentially. And we, train our staff and how to know or recognize the things that should be reported. But we learned that there are things that are going on with our students that even our staff can feel burdened by like, I'm the only person that knows this. I feel the weight of this information. And if something happens to this child, or if they go down whatever path, like, can I sleep at night knowing I'm the only person that maybe knows this information? And we didn't want our staff carrying that weight. And we also believe that it's not what's best for the student, that they would be the only one that knows. So there is a long list of different things that could be reportable on the internal report, but it's online. So they're able to do it from their desk, even in between conversations that they may have had with students, and just share whatever the conversation may be, whatever the concern may be. And it could be anything from, in lower school, maybe recognizing that a child doesn't seem like they're being cared for, like they're coming to school and it looks like they're wearing dirty uniforms, or like their hair isn't brushed. And that's like an extreme, but it's something that has happened. And so something seems like it's off at home. Or it could be a piece of, and even in that circumstance, that is a one piece of a puzzle of like, this is a lower school student that is experiencing that. But that lower school student, we've got a sibling that's in middle school and a sibling that's in high school. And we're seeing kind of signs that maybe are going on here. And we would never be able to put the whole puzzle together if we didn't have a report in a small group of a team that had even a database of, hey, what are our past reports? And this is giving us a full picture that maybe this does need to go in. This is going to CPS because we have a fuller picture of what's going on. So that's maybe an extreme situation. A smaller situation could be something like, I have gotten disturbing, like I had an assignment that I had for my students, and I got a disturbing response from a student that maybe included violence. Like that could be something that could be included in the report. Or that there is suicidal ideation that has been shared with me. And so we've kind of really tried to make it all encompassing. We've trained our staff that like, there is not a wrong report, that if it's simply discipline, then we'll move it to the principal, communicate with them, and we'll move it to the right principal if it was supposed to be discipline. But that you can't do a wrong report. So if you feel that check from the Holy Spirit, then go ahead and communicate that with us. Because it's better for us to be aware and be able to walk through to next steps of what we can do to best help that student. And so in some circumstances, that could be suicidal ideation or self-harm. And going through this process as a school even brought us to a place of even working with our lawyer to see, what are our capabilities of doing this, and creating a policy to where if a student voices or has shared any kind of self-harm or suicidal ideation, that we partner with mom and dad. All of these things are have created honestly beautiful partnerships with mom and dad. But we communicate and we partner with mom and dad, and we say, hey, we're going to remove them from school right now. We're going to come alongside and give resources for how we can help them when they return. But they've got to see a professional counselor 3 times and have a note that says that they're able to come back. Because we are just a Christian education. Like, it is hard. The environment that they're in, the voices that they're wrestling with, the things that our kids are carrying is heavy and hard. And if we just let them boop back in tomorrow, the pressure is just going to build and beg that they crack. And so that's something that we've seen just so much fruit from, is that oftentimes when kids have shared that with an adult, it's because they are seeking help and they're looking for someone to rescue them from what they're drowning in. And this has created a pathway even for showing mom and dad, hey, this is a serious concern that they have. This is something serious we're seeing in them. And for the majority of those students, that's led to continuing on with that professional counselor that's able to give them help and tools that we can't, that we do not offer as a school. And so that's just been a beautiful fruit from our internal reporting system too.
Good. Yeah, I've got a couple follow-up questions and a couple of comments, but Brayden, I'll pass it to you for a second as well, because Courtney just shared for a long time. I'm just kidding. That's great. I'm glad you said all you did because again, these are tools and resources we want our school leaders to have. But Brayden, anything to add to a little bit about what she talked about, and maybe how you've seen these structures work effectively within your work as well.
Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, I think as I'm thinking about this question earlier this week, we had a situation where a student came in, shared just some things that they've been walking through, some heaviness, and in the midst of that, mentioned some suicidal ideation.
Mm,
And because of the way that I have been trained, our staff has been trained, that could have been something that really shook me and put me in panic mode to try to figure out how do I fix the situation. But the reality is we have a clear process. And so I was able to confidently go, I know exactly what our school has put in place for me to take the next steps and help support the student. And it took
yeah,
all the pressure off me to fix it. And so I just got to be an empathetic witness, like we talked about earlier, getting to show up to love, and to be the hands and feet of Christ, and then loop in people from our student protection team to come in, support, call parents, move forward with getting them a referral list for professional help that they can seek before they come back on campus. And I mean, just this week, our student was like, "Hey, I've been trying to get my parents to realize how much I need help, and I'm
mm,
really thinking that they might actually recognize that I'm needing something more, and that they'll take me seriously this time." And so our students, the relief that he
Mhm.
felt of having a safe place to share and people who took him seriously and created space for him to pursue healing and growth, and a path towards wholeness. I've seen firsthand the beauty that's been for our staff, as we don't have to figure this out on our own. We have a pathway to lean on, and for our students to go, okay, my school is a place where I feel seen, loved, and cared for, not just for what grades I will achieve, but for
yeah.
me as a holistic individual.
Yeah, that was something I was going to ask you, Braden, and I think you made a good point. Because I was going to ask, like, how do you create this environment where students or staff or whoever it is feel safe? Even when we talk through these things on the spiritual formation journey map, the way we have it laid out is, the topic is roadblocks and it's care and hardship, and then one of the first things under that is personal ownership. So I know there's got to be there's a what am I trying to say? A reciprocal relationship here. Like we're going to create this environment. We also know that our students have to know that there is this space where they can come to you or come to Courtney or come to someone else to share something. But then they also have to take that step. And now I know we can't force a student to take that step. Ultimately, a student has to make the choice, or a staff member or a parent has to make the choice to say, hey, I'm going to share this. Like there's some vulnerability that's a part of this. And there's always fear at times and vulnerability. And then the enemy starts speaking
Yeah.
like, hey, don't let anyone know. Don't let anyone in. They don't need to know this. But we know Christ says no, confession brings healing because it sheds a light on these things. So, you mentioned a little bit about that idea of safety and support. What are some things that maybe you have done personally, or things that you or your team or your teachers have done that help students to know, like this is a safe space, and this is like, are you guys talking about these things? Do you tell the students that, hey, we do have a process in play that if you do share something with us, we're not going to go and broadcast it to someone else? Like, what are you guys doing within the school that has created this space for students to feel, hey, I can step in and I can share these things?
Yeah. There are a lot of processes that we've kind of put in place. Students from kindergarten through 12th grade get trained on our student protection boundaries and rules,
Okay.
and given clear direction on, hey, if there is something going on, if there's something that has made you feel uncomfortable, if there's something that you are walking through, find a safe adult
Yeah.
and communicate with them. And so it's been cool. We've tried to create common language throughout our whole school,
That's
where
good.
as
Yeah.
students continue year after year after year to get trained in these ideas, this common language becomes a bridge, and it becomes more and more uh, normal for them to go, I'm walking through something, I experience something. What I do is go share with a safe adult.
Yeah.
And it's been cool to watch the culture of our school shift towards that. I feel like it's been a long journey,
Yeah.
moving
Yeah.
closer and closer to that. And Courtney could probably speak more into that. But I think that's a big part of it. And I think just us modeling that we are human beings too.
Yeah.
Us as staff members just getting to be honest in boundaried and age appropriate ways of like, man, I am a human who is walking through hard things too, and I
Yeah.
am reliant on community, on taking these things to the Lord, on leaning on my brothers and sisters in Christ. And
Yeah.
when we model that, it gives students permission to not be okay, to realize, okay, my Christian school is a safe place for me to struggle and
Yeah.
wrestle and figure it out.
Yeah.
And they go, okay, I've seen this person who's farther along in their faith. When they are struggling, they turn to people that they trust and they move towards God rather than away. And so
Mhm.
that must be what I need to do.
Yeah.
So I think modeling is a huge aspect of creating safe places for our students and staff.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, that's really good. Yeah, a lot of what you guys said, I mean, I'm sitting here thinking like, okay, how do we get this into the hands of our school leaders? Like, how do we not that they're not thinking about these things because I know they are, but just a lot of what you guys just explained and the process that you went through, you mentioned this idea of culture. It takes time, right? It didn't, Courtney, you didn't step on the scene in year one, and then by the end of year one, at least I don't think. Now I know you are an awesome leader, but I'm thinking that it took some time to say, hey, we need, SMTs, right? Or you probably didn't get to the year one and think, oh yeah, we've got this program called Eyes on You, and I've got it established and done. Like this most likely could have been ideas you're thinking through that we've got to have some of these structures, but then you got to go through this process and stepping through it. And then one thing that you guys both have mentioned that I think is key is just the word awareness. These is the student ministry teams. Am I saying is it SMTs? Is that what it is? What was
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Got the acronym right. Um, a lot of that is so valuable just because there's a space of awareness.
Mhm.
Bringing up that, hey, a student is really struggling in this class and they typically don't struggle, or it seems like across the board. So now everyone's at least thinking, hey, I'm just going
Mhm.
to at least have an eye on this student. I'm going to see. And what it does, I think it also reminds teachers as well and leaders that the reason you are here at Christian education, which is what Courtney kind of mentioned earlier, hopefully is that you're wanting to invest in the next generation. You're wanting to help them know Jesus and walk with Jesus and grow closer to Jesus so that by the time they leave this school, they know him more fully. And, obviously, hopefully the Spirit has worked in their life. We know we can't control salvation, but it creates this awareness. And then it also adds this spiritual formation perspective that my
Mhm.
ultimate role is not here to coach baseball or to have the best fine arts program or to make sure all my kids get the best grade in my class or to teach history, to where I'm the greatest history teacher in this school. Like those things are all great. But I think at the end of the day, the most important thing is no, I want to invest in students and I want to care for and love the students that God has placed in my care. And so that ultimately is the number one priority for me at the Christian school, that I'm seeking to reflect Jesus and to help students grow in Jesus, and all those other things are as important as they can be. Like you probably could be the best baseball coach if you really truly loved your kids and they know that they're loved by you, would probably make you, hey, you might be the best coach at the school because your students feel like they're cared by you. So there's a lot of things here. So look, I want to briefly, because I know we have to wrap up, but if one of you, and maybe Courtney, you could kind of shed some light on this, because I think leaders are going to be asking, okay, well, what's the process then? Like, how did you go through and begin to lay these things out? Because it's not just verbal things that you were talking about. Like I'm sure there's written documentation. I'm sure you have, document after document of how you've kind of laid these things out, the step-by-step process for not only here's what a student can do when this is going on, but also here is how staff are trained in this, and here's the steps they take. Um, what did this process, and I know you don't got to go into too many details. What I'll do at the end of this podcast is make sure that leaders know that there's a way that maybe they could either connect with you, or you could share some of those things with me, and that I could share those with a network of, hey, here's the steps they took to get to this point. But what was, if I'm asking this correctly, like what did that process look like, and how long did it take to get where you are today from when you started with some of these things?
Yeah, it's a great question.
And again, you don't got to go into all the details of it, but I think it'd be good for our leaders to at least hear that, number one, this is a long runway. It's not going to happen by the end of May. It's probably not going to happen by the end of your next school year. You can begin to implement some of these things, but it's going to take some time, and it's probably going to take a team of people in your school who are really working on this together. I'll stop talking. I'll let you share. Go ahead.
Yes, and I think if I was going to encourage school leaders, I think the most crucial piece of all of this is the way that you are thinking through the lens of how are we going to move this to a place where it becomes cultural. And I think that you have to be intentional about the order of that you do things. I think the exciting piece, if I was a listener and I didn't have any of these programs, I think I would get really excited about SMTs and be like, I can do that. I can put another meeting on the calendar. I can make that. I can gather my people, and they are probably going to lean into it too. But I think even what Brayden shared earlier about when the situation came up with a student, that it didn't panic, that he had felt a safety of, I know the process that's supposed to happen. And so I think way before you get to what are the ways that we're able to really see fruit and start to see these things play out, is you've got to work and think about what is our process in place of when we have these situations in crisis, when, is it that they are going directly to the nurse? Is the nurse the one that's going to be calling home? Is it going to be the counselor? Is the principal involved? How are we already? I mean, I think that every school is required to be training in CPS. If you're not, you should for sure be doing that. But like, how have we been training in CPS? Are there ways that we need to make more clear to our faculty? We had to make way more clear, what does neglect even mean? Because neglect is, it looks different when you're talking about it through the lens of a private school. When people are paying tuition, it's easy to be like, we will never have a kid that experiences neglect, but you will if you're doing it by how it's actually defined. So anyways, I think like really pulling back and saying, hey, from the foundation, what do we already have in place, and what is the process that we want? Who are the players that we have that we trust, the roles that we have? Even sharing for the internal reporting that I was talking about, it goes to a small team of us. And I'm not even sharing what roles those are, because I don't think that those roles make sense at every school, but at our school, they make sense, the 4 people that are on it.
Yeah.
One of them I think does make sense is the head of school. I would encourage that your head of school should be one of those people. Because in order for any of this to be fruitful, I think that from it coming from a place of leadership and the involvement of the head of school is just absolutely crucial. And so I think all of this took years and years and years. And the reason why it took, the last, I would say, confidently, the first 2 years I was here, we were doing a couple things that were really trial and error. Very much so. But I think the last 6 years is what has really over time been building this up and getting it to a place where it's cultural. And having the involvement of a leadership initiative when you're doing it, I think is just massive. But it changes the way, like Douglas, like you were talking about, of our staff are viewing their roles as being a part of the transformative work of our students, and not just my role is just to get up and teach English and then that's it, and to pass them on to the next grade. But they're seeing through all of the training. I heard recently that it's called everboarding instead of onboarding, and I was like,
that's good.
That checks out. But they're continuing to hear trainings and be in environments where they see that their role is far beyond whatever content they have or whatever sport that they're coaching.
Yeah, that's good. One thing that Brayden mentioned too, and you had mentioned this as well, that I thought was really key in all this, you know, the importance of having a plan and a process is that it helps you to know how to think in these situations. And what I mean is it doesn't do everything for you. You still have to kind of walk through the situations with a student. But what it does is it immediately, okay, there's this high pressure crisis type moment or something that I just found out about that a student is walking through. And without a plan or a process, you immediately, your mind's running a million miles an hour and you're thinking, okay, well, what do I need to do? How should I reach out? What do I need to say? But having this process in place immediately, like you said, Brayden, I love that idea of it, takes the pressure off. Like you don't feel the overwhelming weight and burden of how am I going to step into this situation, bring resolve, find a solution. What am I going to do? Who am I going to run to? And then for me, I just begin to overthink everything. And then I'm inactive, right? I don't do anything at all because it's like, I don't have the perfect thing in place. So I don't know what to do. So I think having this process and having a plan for leaders who are listening, I think that's why it's so important is even though it's not cookie cutter and it's not perfect, it at least eliminates some of those high pressure situations to where we don't make a rash decision that then we, the following that, the next day feel like, well, I wish I wouldn't have stepped into it that way. It at least, especially in the very beginnings of the process, takes that pressure off and says, okay, I know what to do in this situation because here's what our school has come together and made a plan for. So like, I know I'm going to go to this person or I'm going to report it in this system. I know who I need to follow up with, and that just alleviates a lot of the burden of feeling this is all on your shoulders. Now, I know some of our school leaders that are listening, they might not have the resources that you guys have at Liberty, but I think even if they don't, at least having some type of plan in place takes away that first really difficult decision that has to be made. And it's going to give them some wisdom on, hey, here's the step I need to take as I go through this. And so, yeah, again, as an encouragement to those who are listening, these things take time. Anytime we talk with leaders about something that they're doing that we really encourage, like we think is a great initiative within the schools, one thing we always talk about, culture always comes up. Culture always comes up. That's such a big thing, not only in our schools, that's everywhere. It's like if you've been on a team that your coach has been there for 10 years, 15 years, or you're a freshman or you're a senior and you've had this coach for the past 3 years, but now you get into your senior year and that coach is no longer there and you got this brand new guy and you're like, I don't know about this guy. Like, the culture shifts. So it takes time to really help people understand what the culture is about. And so I think that constant steady drip is what we really talk to a lot of our leaders on, that, hey, you got to continue to drip these things out. You can't do it all on one day or in 1 year, but over a 3 to 4 year process, it might feel really slow in the moment. But if you guys were to look, Courtney, over the past 8 years or Brayden over the past 5 years, you see how this process has come together. And it doesn't feel like it took forever anymore because you're living in it. Right. And now you're actually putting these things into practice. And you're like, man, I'm glad it actually took us the time it did to get here, even though there's some trial and error involved, because we feel like it's an effective way to go about this. So yeah, this has been just a really encouraging conversation. And again, I know there's a lot of other details we can go into. It would be great maybe to have you guys back to do even a training with some school leaders at some point. I don't know what that might look like, but really to take some time and maybe have a couple of sessions where you kind of do go through that process. And you could even share some documentation of, hey, here's some things that we've created. Here's how we put this together. And then contextually, whatever it works with in different schools, every school is different. But they could at least kind of have some things to kind of put their hands on, so to speak, so they know steps to take. So look, as we wrap up, first off, thank you guys so much for being here today. And this has been really great, but I do want to kind of ask just a couple of concluding questions. And I think you guys have already answered bits of this. So if there's anything else you want to add, you can. I think for our leaders who are listening, like we said, it's really important to have this plan in place. But I think some maybe just don't know where to begin. And Courtney, I think you mentioned this a little bit, but just you're kind of a closing word for you. Like, what's one simple step a school could take if they don't have anything formal in place just yet? What would you suggest or recommend for them?
I think I mentioned it before of having the head of school or the principals involved in the process. But I think
Yeah.
at the very beginning, I talked about how this is all the work of the Holy Spirit. And I was even thinking yesterday about like Liberty Christian as God's school. Like it is open. The doors are open. We've got students in the seats because this is God's school that he is using and moving through and working in. And the second that it's not, I don't want to be a part of it, And so I think what my encouragement would be is to gather those leaders that you know would be crucial to the process, and to seek the Lord of, hey, God, we see that this is a need. We see that kids are falling through the cracks. We see that, some of our teachers will know that our kid is in crisis, but they don't want to share it with anybody else. And these things are happening in silos or whatever it may be. And this is where our school is at. And would you give us the wisdom and discernment to know what is best going to fit the format of our school, that we can move forward in a process that comes alongside and helps these students? Because the reality is that while the student themselves, I mean, this process has helped so many of our students, but it also, when I think about it from a school perspective, would put us in an extreme space of liability that could shut down the doors if we weren't handling situations rightly. And so that's even where the head of school comes involved, of like, hey, this is so crucial, because we see schools on the internet all of the time because they didn't handle a situation correctly, or they thought that they knew how to handle it and they didn't know how. And so we want to be intentional that we're able to continue doing the mission and vision that God has given us. And so this cannot be neglected. It's not just an add-on cherry on top that we can tell our parents about when they go on tours. Yeah. This is crucial for us to keep turning the lights on every day, because we have taken this role of stewardship, that this is part of my job. And we are stewarding all of these hours with these students. And I need to make sure that I'm doing that in a way that is safe and caring for them and meeting their needs. So
yeah. And with your staff, real quick before I move to Brayden for final thoughts. So we talked a little bit about staff training, but I just want to make sure we hit it clearly before we conclude the conversation. So I know you talked about you communicate these things with your students as well, kind of what the process is for them. I'm assuming the same thing with staff. So is it like every year, there's going to be different professional development situations or times where you're in front of your staff? Just, is it more at this point, now that the process, is it turned more into like a reminder of things, or are you just constantly putting these things in front of staff to make sure, hey, here's kind of what we do in these situations?
Yeah. Yes to all of those things. I'd say that we have a more intensive training that we do every August, because we're coming back and our brains are set for the year. Yeah. And so I think that everyone can use the reminder every single year of, this is the way that we do things, and here and within these boundaries lies the safety of the way that you can fully invest in and disciple students. And so we want you to feel confident in the way that you're able to engage with them. So at the beginning of every year, we do that. Now that the system has been going, what we've been doing is even more concentrated training. So like, we go to the middle school staff, and I pulled numbers in a very protective, doesn't share any details way of the reports that we had gotten, and even showed them like, hey, here are the kinds of things that we're getting reports on. Here's what we are, the amount of students that we've been able to help even in this last year, because of the way that you guys are sharing information with us. And thank you for doing that, because these things are going to be happening with students regardless of whether or not we are getting these reports, but because we're able to help them. So that's been an extra step that we've done now that it's been in place. So there is a more intensive kind of training at the beginning of the year. But then we're also, our small group team of the Student Protection Program, which again is a little more all-encompassing, but we meet every single week. and we are going over, what are the areas that we need to continue to grow in as a school. And so what that may look like is at a staff meeting throughout the year, there's trends or shifts that we're seeing. We're like, okay, we've got to turn the needle back this way because we're getting into some territory that our staff just needs a reminder. Or we have our principals on their weekly principal emails at times add a line of just like a reminder of something that they need to be aware of, or reminding our staff of like, hey, don't forget,
That's good.
whatever it may be. So I'd say it's a combination of intentional training and then continuing to put reminders in front of us and celebrating just the victory that we've seen in our students and in their lives. And then they obviously have casual encounters with that.
Yeah. I think as school leaders, we forget sometimes to celebrate the good things, right? We kind of, even with an event, we move on from one event to the next, but we forget, hey, let's celebrate what actually did happen in this event. We can talk about things we need to change and fix, but let's also celebrate what did happen. So I think that's a good thing of celebrating the success that this is seeing in the school. Brayden, I want to give you the kind of the final words here today, man. I want to I'll open it up for you to share a little bit, just like what is one thing, right? One thing, maybe it could be a couple things that you would want every Christian school leader to remember or to be encouraged by when caring for people in hardship.
Yeah, I think a quote that has really resonated with me, one of my favorite authors, Dr. Kurt Thompson, who's a Christian neurobiologist, says that we all come into the world looking for someone that's looking for us. And I think sometimes it can be that simple that we need to invite our staff, invite ourselves to see the ways that our students are looking for someone that's looking for them. And when we can step into that place with love, it's honestly often the greatest apologetic that we could offer our students to the way of Jesus. That sometimes it's not the elaborate arguments or amazing detailed belief systems that will convince people that God is who he says he is, but it's an experience of being seen and loved through a Jesus follower that tips the scale and goes, okay, I want what he has. And so I think more than anything, to simplify what you're called to is go see people the way that Jesus does and move toward them.
Yeah, man, that's a good word. And one thing that you mentioned a couple times, and I might need your help to phrase it the right way, something about the presence. What is it you've said about presence a couple times? There's a phrase you've used.
Something to the effect of we're called to be empathetic witnesses.
There it is.
We step in with slow, loving presence like Jesus does.
I love that. The empathetic witnesses, slow, loving presence. I think that's really good for us as we kind of conclude today. So look, hey, this has been a great conversation. And again, I appreciate you guys so much for doing this today. Just kind of a final thought for our leaders who are listening. We've said several times on this conversation, there's no simple solution to walking with people in hardships. And often the best thing we can do is be a presence in their lives, like what Brayden has talked about. And I think that's so key. I think just being there for people, whether you have the words or you don't have the words, and it could be at times that God is telling you just to be silent and just sit with someone and be with someone. And even though we can't see how that has an impact at times, or we might not be able to see the fruit of it in the moment, we believe that, like Courtney has mentioned, if the Holy Spirit is leading us and guiding us, if the Holy Spirit is working in our words or in our silence, like he's the ultimate agent of comfort. But it's so cool that he would call us and use us to be the channel through which that comfort is given, and that comfort is felt, and that comfort is experienced, which in and of itself is just grace that we get to be called to this at all. So I know both of you have embraced the challenge and are reflecting the character of Christ and really helping people at Liberty Christian School walk through difficult seasons. And so, Courtney and Brayden, just thank you so much for taking the time to join us today on the Grafted Together podcast. This really has been, I think, a fruitful conversation for sure. And I'm praying that the Lord will use it for weeks and months and years to come in the lives of our school leaders. And we appreciate the work you guys are doing at Liberty Christian. So keep up the good work. Continue to be faithful witnesses. Continue to obey him in the spaces and places he has called you to go. But thanks for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Grafted Together is a presentation of the Association of Christian Schools International. Learn more about biblical worldview and spiritual formation at acsi.org/graftedtogether.